Welcome back, friends. I'm Julia, and I'm here to talk about another type of GMAT critical reasoning question and to show you the approach to solving these CR questions that got me a perfect score on my GMAT verbal section. In these questions, there will be two statements in the argument that seem as though they couldn't both be true, and your job is to pick the answer that resolves the paradox. We'll be working through a couple of practice questions from TTP so you can see what I mean. Let's start with a simple example. To help curtail air pollution caused by emissions from gasoline engines 5 years ago, the country of Rentala began providing citizens with large tax breaks on the purchase of any zero-emission electric vehicle, with the result that the number of such electric vehicles on Rentalan roadways has increased, while the number of gasoline-powered vehicles on the roadways has decreased. However, over the same period of time, the amount of air pollution caused by emissions from gasoline engines has increased in Rentala. Which of the following, if true, does the most to resolve the apparent paradox? Let's start by identifying the question type, which is pretty clearly indicated here. Now that we see what we need to do, I like to make note of the two seemingly contradictory statements that we need to reconcile. The first one is, due to government tax breaks 5 years ago, there are now more electric vehicles on the Rentala roadways and less gasoline-powered vehicles on the road. The second one is, the amount of air pollution caused by gasoline engine emissions has increased over the same recent 5 years. How can both of these things be true? So how can there be less gasoline-powered cars on the roadways and more gasoline engine emissions in Rentala? Let's see what the answer choices have to offer. A. The country of Rentala has always used exemplary methods to measure air pollution caused by emissions from gasoline-powered vehicles. This answer validates that the data these statements are based on is probably true. However, per GMAT rules, we already assume that they're true, so that doesn't help us. It doesn't resolve anything. B. When countries neighboring Rentala provided tax breaks on the purchase of zero-emission electric vehicles, those countries experienced significant declines in air pollution caused by emissions from gasoline engines. This underlines the paradox, if anything. It certainly doesn't resolve it. C. Many of the citizens of Rentala have always chosen to use emission-free forms of transportation, including walking, riding bicycles, and using the electric subway system. This isn't relevant. Even if there are 10 more people driving electric cars and 10 less driving gasoline-powered cars, it's still weird that the gasoline engine emissions have increased. These many citizens aren't the ones we're looking into. D. In Rentala, 5 years ago, great numbers of massive gasoline-powered machines began working around the clock to extract from the ground metals necessary for manufacturing batteries of electric vehicles. If, to meet the increasing demand for electric vehicles, the manufacturing process creates much higher emission levels than those offset by the relatively fewer gasoline-powered vehicles on the roads, then that would explain why both of these statements could be true, and therefore it resolves the paradox. E. In addition to providing citizens with large tax breaks on the purchase of any zero-emission electric vehicle, Rentala also imposed clean air taxes on any gasoline-powered vehicle owner. This could help support that there are less gasoline-powered cars on the road, but again, we already know that to be true from the original argument. Best answer is D. In the small town of Oakville, the proprietors of the 3 locally owned coffee shops located there were dismayed to see that a major coffee shop chain with a big marketing budget had decided to open a shop in town. However, much to the surprise of the locally owned coffee shop's proprietors, After the major coffee chain shop opened, all three locally owned shops experienced significant increases in business. Which of the following does the most to explain the surprising outcome? Surprising outcome is the indicator that this is a call to resolve an apparent contradiction. There's another indicator here for the premises, which is the transition word however. Sentence is often a sign that the second statement isn't what you would expect to happen from the first statement. I'm going to use that to find the two halves of my paradox. Part one, there's a large coffee chain with a big marketing budget moving into this small town, and the owners of the coffee shops that are already there are concerned about it taking business away from them. Part two, the owners are surprised to see that the presence of the large chain not only doesn't take business away from them, but in fact increases the sales they're doing. How can both of these things be true? A. Most of the people who regularly drink coffee in Oakville prefer the taste of the locally owned coffee shop's coffee over that of the major chain's coffee. This could explain why they didn't lose business, but not why their sales increased. B. During peak hours, the length of time customers spend in line at the major chain's shop is often longer than some people are willing to wait. The word some could be like 3 or 4 people or most of the people in this town. Not terribly descript, not helpful for our paradox. C. The proprietors of the locally owned coffee shops have run the shops for many years and are familiar to residents of Oakville. Again, this doesn't explain a recent increase in business if it's been the case for years. D. The marketing messages that the major chain shop puts out to potential customers have convinced many that drinking coffee is enjoyable and life enhancing. Here we go. Have you ever been watching TV and seen someone enjoying a baked potato or whatever and thought, I haven't had a baked potato in a while. I'm going to make that for dinner? I for sure have. If the folks in Oakville were hanging out, minding their own business, not even thinking about buying a cappuccino, and then the large chain's ad came on and reminded them that coffee is great and will improve their day, that would explain why there's been an increase in total sales of coffee in this town. We don't really know what market share the big chain has as compared to the three local coffee shops, but if total sales increased enough, then that would resolve the paradox. E. The major chain shop serves not only coffee but also gourmet sandwiches and desserts. This is irrelevant because it doesn't resolve anything. Also, I can't tell you the last time I was in a coffee shop and they didn't also have snacks. It's a given. The best answer is D. Feeling good? I hope so, because we're going to try one that's a bit more challenging. A certain Midwestern American town had only two hardware stores. One of them closed down last year. Surprisingly, following the closing of that store, demand for goods sold in the remaining store has decreased. Which of the following, if true, best explains why the result was counter to the result that might have been reasonably expected? This is where it's indicated that you'll be resolving a paradox because the result wasn't what one would expect. And surprisingly, here gives you a clue as to where the two halves that need to be reconciled will be located. So, part one, there were two hardware stores in a town, but one closed down, so now there's only one left. Part two, instead of the remaining store getting some portion of the sales that the now closed store used to make, its sales have also declined. What's going on? Let's solve this mystery. A. Over the past year, the town invested in the district in which the remaining hardware store is located, making the district more attractive to shoppers. This doesn't explain the surprising outcome, but does make it more surprising. B. The remaining hardware store is run by a national corporation with no close ties to the community in which the store is located. This might seem tempting, but it's not drawing a clear enough link between the two halves of our paradox. C. In a town near the town in which the hardware store is located, a store that had been selling some hardware type items in one department closed that department. So there are even less alternatives than we initially thought for these people to buy their hardware items, and they're still not shopping at this place. This answer does not resolve our mystery. D. After the other hardware store closed, the store manager at the remaining store did not make any significant changes to that store's operations. This is a statement showing that on this side, nothing changed. It doesn't explain a decrease in sales, though. And E, the store that closed had been offering free classes via which people could learn how to undertake projects requiring tools and supplies available at hardware stores. So the store that closed was teaching people how to use the stuff they sold, thereby increasing demand for their products and their competitors' matching products. Now they're closed, so the extra demand is falling off, causing decreased sales in the town overall. This explains how both things could be true. So this is our best answer, E. Notice that we didn't spend any time looking for conclusions in these questions. That's because paradox problems aren't about conclusions. They're about two bits of information that don't quite fit together and adding a third bit of information that completes the story. I've had a lovely time hanging out and solving these problems. I hope it's been enlightening for you. Enjoy solving some more paradox mysteries on your own for now, and I will see you next time.